So in this next exercise, we're going to be looking how we can add and remove elements dynamically using jQuery. We're actually going to be creating HTML elements dynamically through the use of jQuery and having them show up on the page, and then when the user interacts with these elements, we're going to have the page do a variety of things. So in the browser, this is what our page looks like. It's our screwdriver page with some modified text. It has several paragraphs at the top, and then it has the header that says, before using a screwdriver, please take the following oath, and then it has some bullet points that we would hope that our user would take into consideration before they use a screwdriver. So back in Dreamweaver, this is what the HTML looks like, and this is very similar to what we've been working with. Most of the styles are exactly what we've used in the past. Down here in the HTML, we have our container div, which wraps around all of the content on the page. We have the 4 paragraphs that are at the top of the page, and then we have a div with an ID of oath that wraps around the oath section of content on the page. So this is how the HTML is set up. We'll go ahead and begin writing our JavaScript, and we simply have the document ready function sitting on the page, and of course we don't have any script in there as of yet. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a button at the bottom of the page that the user will be able to ultimately click so that they can agree with the oath. So that's what we'll be creating. So I'm going to start my Jquery statement, and then I'm going to actually begin by creating an HTML tag for an input with a type of button. And because I'm writing HTML, I will put the values in double quotes, just like you normally would when you're writing HTML. We're going to go ahead and we're going to assign this button to have a value as well. The value is going to be what the button actually displays, what it says on the button. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to actually create an ID that's associated with this button so that we can target this button later on using jQuery and have it do different things. So we're going to go ahead and give it an ID of button yes. I'll close the HTML tag. I'll put my ending single quote that we need for jQuery and then close the parentheses. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to use the insert after method to insert this onto our page. So I actually need to preface this with a period, so it's going to say dot insert after, and then I need to tell jQuery where I want it to insert, and we're going to have it insert after our div that we've called oath. So we'll go ahead and display it right there. So let's go ahead and save our page, and let's take a look at this in the browser. When we come into the browser and we refresh the page, if we scroll down to the bottom, you can now see that there is a button that says I agree that appears underneath the oath div. Now the button is a little bit tight to the oath div, so I think I'll just go ahead and create some HTML or a CSS style in the web page that will allow the oath div to push down a little bit. So let's go into our CSS and we'll just add this rule down here. We're going to go ahead and add a rule for a ID of oath, and we'll simply add a margin on the bottom of 10 pixels just to push that away from the edge a little bit more, because that'll look a little bit better. So if we come back into the browser and we refresh, you can now see that we have a little bit of space right there, and then there's our agree button. This might look a little bit small because I'm kind of zoomed out on the browser. If I zoom back in, this is actual size right here, but I just wanted you to be able to see everything. I guess it looks okay like this. Alright, so the next thing we want to do is we're going to assign an action to the button. When the user clicks the button, we actually want it to do something. Right now it doesn't do anything. We can accomplish this using jQuery as well. So we'll come back into our script, and the next line of script is going to create a function that will handle the clicking of the button. So I'm going to start a new Jquery statement, and I'm going to tell Jquery what it is that I want to target, and it's going to be my button yes, which is the ID that we created up here. So now I'm able to actually target this particular item on the page because we did give it the ID. And then we'll go ahead and we'll use the click event handler, which we've used already in this course. And we'll go ahead and tell jQuery that we want to run a function once the button has been clicked. And I'm just going to go ahead and add my ending curly brace, parentheses, and semicolon. Sometimes I like to add those right away so I don't forget to put them back in later on. So now we have to go ahead and say what we want to have happen when the button is clicked. So what I'd like to have happen when the user actually clicks the button, if they do agree with this statement, I'd like this statement just to disappear. So let's go ahead and let's do that first. We're going to go ahead and now tell jQuery that when the button is clicked, we want the oath div to become removed from the page. So we're going to use the .remove method to do that. And there's no parameters that we're going to pass on. And I'll just end my statement. So pretty simple. Let's save the page and let's test this in the browser. When we refresh the screen, if we click the agree, now the oath goes away. So that's great. The problem is now the agree button is still here and it doesn't really make sense anymore because what are you agreeing to? So we probably want to remove that as well, and we already know how to do that. We can basically go ahead and pass on the this keyword in jQuery, and because we're inside the button, when we use this, it knows that we're talking about the button, and we'll just use that .remove method again. So now if we come back to the browser and refresh it one more time, you'll see the oath, and if you agree to the oath disappears, and so does the button. So that's perfect. That's what we want to have happen. So the next thing that might be nice to do is when you click the button and agree to the statement and the oath goes away, it might be nice to give the user some feedback. So let's go ahead and let's have jQuery generate a message for our user as well. So this is all going inside the function because we want all of these things to fire when the button is actually clicked. So what we'll do here is we're going to add a jQuery statement, and we're going to go ahead and let's create an HTML element. So I'm going to go ahead and create an H2 tag right here. So I'm just going to go ahead and open the tag, and then I'm going to put the actual message that I want to be displayed. So we're going to say you may now use the screwdriver, and then we'll close the H2 tag just like we normally would in HTML, and I'm going to close my jQuery, and then I'm going to go ahead and let jQuery know where I want this message to appear. So this message, we have a number of ways that we can actually have it appear. One way would to be to insert before something. So let's go ahead and let's try using the insert before method, and then I need to tell it what I want it to insert before. Well, I'm going to go ahead and put a paragraph down. So we'll go ahead and add a P tag right here, and this basically should insert this message before paragraph tag. So let's see what we have when we test this in the browser. Here's our page. Here's the oath. When I click the button, the oath and the button should disappear, and they do, but you can see what happens. It's now adding you may now use the screwdriver. It's adding my message as an H2 before every paragraph that exists on the page. It's not quite what we want, so let's modify this a little bit. The easiest way for us to insert this in the place that we want it to be is to actually go back into our HTML and add a placeholder, because we can't really tell it to insert before or after the paragraphs because that's going to be every paragraph. The oath div has now disappeared, so we don't want that to happen. I guess we could have it display after the container div. That would be an option, but because we want it to keep the parameters that we've established with our other CSS, I'm just going to go ahead and make a div in here. I'm just going to add a empty div with an ID, and let's go ahead and give it an ID. We'll call it message, and then I'm just going to close the div right here. So just adding a div to my page. If I save my page and we refresh the page in the browser, we're not going to see anything because the div doesn't have any content, so it's not going to show up. But now that we have that div there, we'll be able to tell our message to appear in this particular location. So let's go ahead and do that now. Back here in jQuery, we'll just modify this sentence right here. We're still going to add as an H2, our message, you may now use the screwdriver, but instead of using the insert before and inserting it into a paragraph, we're going to go ahead and use the append to method, which is going to go ahead and allow us to modify something that already exists. And then I need to tell jQuery where I want that message to be inserted. So I'm going to go ahead and type the message div that we just created. So now this line says, okay, take this H2 and append it to the message div. So we'll go ahead and save our page, and when we refresh in the browser now and test our page, when I click I agree, you can see that now the button disappears, the oath disappears, and it says you may now use the screwdriver. So this is exactly what we wanted to have happen. Really nice that we can do this with jQuery. We're actually modifying content on the fly depending on the interactions of the user.